The moment the CFO pushed back his chair, I knew what was coming. I'd rehearsed this strategy meeting for months, preparing data, projections, risk assessments. Every detail polished until it gleamed. Yet nothing could have prepared me for the sight of 11 executives rising in unison like a perfectly choreographed rejection. "We're done wasting time on her mistakes," Marcus, the CFO, announced loudly enough for the entire floor to hear. His voice had that smug, lazy confidence of a man who'd never once been held accountable for the damage he caused. The room shifted with a rustling of tailored suits and polished shoes scraping against the floor. Not one of them met my eyes. Not one. They gathered their tablets, stacks of untouched reports, their overpriced coffees, then moved as a single unit toward the door. My mouth opened but no sound came out. I had been mid-sentence explaining the structural failure patterns I'd uncovered in our logistics system. Patterns that threatened our biggest contracts. Patterns they knew had been buried long before I arrived. 11 executives abandoned the room, their backs forming a wall of silent dismissal. Marcus paused at the doorway, hand on the light switch. "Claire," he said without turning around. "Don't bother finishing. No one cares." Then he flicked the lights off. The room dimmed, leaving only the pale glow of my projector, illuminating the graphs I had worked on every night for the last 7 weeks. My heart hammered against my ribs, shaking with anger, humiliation, and something sharper. For exactly 30 seconds I sat frozen, not moving, not breathing. Then everything inside me stilled. The fear evaporated. The shame dissolved. All that remained was clarity. I opened my laptop, navigated to a draft email I'd prepared days ago. One attachment, one sentence. I hit send. By 2 p.m. 8 of them would be. But that moment would come later. Before the unraveling began, before the building would flood with investigators and panic, there was only the quiet hum of the projector and the single thought echoing through my mind. They just confirmed everything I'd suspected for weeks, that the executives were trying to divert attention from a major internal breach. Something serious enough that they were willing to sacrifice anyone who got too close. I just didn't know how deep it went. But now their synchronized walkout was as good as a confession. I closed my laptop and took a long breath. The same breath I used to take before surgical presentations back when I worked in clinical risk analysis. Before the accident, before the lawsuit that pushed me out of medicine and into corporate compliance, I'd reinvented myself once. Could do it again. My name is Claire. Until last week, I was the Director of Strategic Risk Management at Vidian Industries, one of the largest supply chain technology firms in the country. A place that prided itself on innovation. A place that built its legacy on safety and transparency. A place that had no idea the storm I was about to bring to their door. I wasn't always the woman who quietly gathered evidence. I wasn't always the woman executives feared. Growing up, my father worked in construction. He used to say, "Measure twice, cut once. But if you see the foundation cracking, don't walk away. Fix it. Even if no one thanks you." He died after a scaffolding collapse caused by falsified safety reports. I was 17. That day shaped me, and maybe that's why Vidian recruited me so aggressively. "We need someone who isn't afraid to tell the truth," Marcus had said during my interview. Funny how quickly the truth becomes a mistake when powerful people feel threatened. The first red flag appeared during my 3rd week when I discovered a batch of internal audits missing from the digital archives. When I asked the audit manager about them, she went pale and muttered something about administrative misplacement. Then came the whispered warnings, the nervous glances, the unexplained resignation of my predecessor, and finally the numbers. Oh, the numbers, the discrepancies, the patterns, the evidence no one wanted to talk about. They thought walking out would scare me, intimidate me, break me. Instead, they handed me the final puzzle piece. As I left the darkened meeting room, the projector still glowing behind me, I felt no fear. Only the cold, steady certainty that the email I had just sent was the beginning of the end for them. By the time I stepped out of the dimmed conference room, the humiliation on my skin had already hardened into something else. Purpose. The email I had sent was simple, clinical, and heavier than any threat I could have uttered out loud. To L. Harrington subject. Vidian internal findings, immediate review requested, attachment. Full report text body as discussed. Evidence attached. Confirm receipt. No drama, no emotion, just facts, dangerous ones. My heels clicked softly as I walked down the corridor toward my office. Most people avoided eye contact, as if humiliation were contagious. Few whispered. A few stared at their screens a little too intensely. But Nadia, one of my data analysts, glanced up with a look I hadn't expected. Fear not for herself. For me. She waited until the hallway emptied before approaching. They're saying you accused the logistics team of fraud, she whispered. That's not what happened. I know. She swallowed hard. They're spinning it fast. Marcus told the operations floor your report was destructive and grossly incompetent. Of course he did. Classic preemptive retaliation. Thank you for telling me, I said. She hesitated. Claire, be careful. Then she slipped back into her cubicle like a shadow, afraid of light. Inside my office, I locked the door before sitting down. I didn't have long. When regulators receive a report like mine, especially one flagged urgent, things start moving quickly. Yet everything that followed happened even faster than I expected. At 1:07 p.m. my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Claire Wilson. Yes, this is Agent Harrington. We've received your transmission. The tone was crisp, controlled, but beneath it was tension, real tension. We need clarification on several points, she continued. Particularly the supply chain tampering and the altered subcontractor vetting forms. I can explain all of it. We'll need to conduct interviews today. How soon can you meet us in the lobby? Check the time. 1:07 p.m. The executives weren't expecting anything until next quarter's audit. Give me 10 minutes, I said. We'll be there in 8. She hung up. 8 minutes, not hours, not days. 8 minutes until the first crack hit Vidian like a tremor before an earthquake. Before leaving my office, I opened the drawer where I kept my small external drive. I'd encrypted and backed up every piece of evidence. The altered reports, the deleted audits, the internal messages where senior management joked about creative compliance. I slipped the drive into my coat pocket, then grabbed only my essentials. Arrogant executives always believed they controlled the timeline. They were about to learn otherwise. When I reached the elevator, my reflection in the metal doors surprised me. Calm, focused. Not a trace of the woman they'd tried to humiliate an hour earlier. The elevator opened and standing inside was Marcus. He leaned against the back wall, arms crossed, eyes gleaming with a predator's confidence. Well, he said smoothly. That meeting sure fell apart quickly. You really should work on your delivery. I stepped inside without responding. The doors closed. Marcus chuckled. I heard you locked yourself in your office afterward. Emotional damage control. Something like that. You should know, he continued, lowering his voice. Your little presentation stunt won't save you. The board trusts us, not you. And we can bury this easily. I turned my head slightly. Can you? His smile faltered. Just a hair, but I saw it. When evidence disappears, he said, no one remembers it existed. My stomach tightened, not in fear, but in vindication. He just confirmed what I already suspected. They'd destroyed reports before. The elevator doors opened. Marcus stepped out first, adjusting his suit jacket with the arrogance of a man who believed nothing could touch him. Try not to make a scene when HR calls you, he said over his shoulder. I watched him walk away. Try not to make a scene. The irony nearly made me laugh because by 2 p.m. 8 of them would be. The lobby was busier than usual. Employees clustered near the coffee kiosk, murmuring over some company-wide memo I hadn't seen yet. When I walked past them, conversations abruptly stopped. And then the glass doors swung open. 4 individuals in dark suits entered. 2 women, 2 men. Agent Harrington led them. Badge already visible. The entire lobby froze. People turned. Phones subtly lifted. Security looked uncertain. Federal Compliance Division, Harrington announced to the guard. We're here to review internal submissions made this morning and begin preliminary examinations. The guard's face drained of color. He fumbled for his radio. Harrington turned to me. Miss Wilson. Yes. Please step with us. As we moved toward the internal corridor, whispers rippled across the lobby. Is that Claire? What's happening? Are we under investigation? My heart thudded. Not from fear, but from the weight of what was beginning. We reached the private meeting rooms, and Harrington closed the door behind us. Your report was thorough, she said. But the patterns you uncovered suggest long-term systemic concealment. We'll need cooperation from several executives immediately. I exhaled slowly. You'll get it. She sat down, opened her folder, and tapped her pen. Let's start with Marcus. Tell me everything you know. By 2 p.m., 8 of them would be walking out of this building. Not with confidence, not with arrogance, but with investigators on either side of them. And this time they wouldn't be the ones in control. Agent Harrington didn't waste time. The moment the door clicked shut, she opened her file, eyes scanning the pages like she'd memorized half of it already. Claire, she began. I need you to walk me through the internal patterns you mentioned. Starting with the subcontractor irregularities. I nodded, pulling up my encrypted drive. It started small. Missing signatures, duplicate approvals. Then I found supplier audits marked compliant despite failed background checks. Harrington exchanged a look with one of her colleagues. For how long? At least 3 years. The pen in her hand froze midair. That long, she repeated quietly. Yes, I said. And the scale is bigger than logistics. Financial reports were being amended after board reviews. Safety evaluations were rewritten to hide systemic problems. And someone, likely multiple people, deleted evidence from the archives. Which executives were involved? She asked. The patterns point to at least 8, possibly more. Her colleague Agent Davis leaned forward. Do you have proof of their direct involvement? Yes. I tapped the folder on my laptop. Email chains, approval stamps, metadata alterations, and recorded conversations. Harrington's brow lifted. Recorded. Meeting rooms auto-record everything under Section 4.3 of the company policy manual. Most executives forget that. A small sharp smile appeared on Davis's face. Convenient. He nodded. Very. Harrington closed her file. Claire, what you've documented isn't internal misconduct. It borders on large-scale corporate fraud. We're going to need access to executive offices immediately. My pulse flickered. Then you're right on time. He checked her watch. 1:41 p.m. 19 minutes until the storm. The agents moved with quiet efficiency, a practiced choreography. Harrington gestured for me to follow her to the elevator. You'll stay with us, she said. We'll need your context for what we find. As we walked out, employees began noticing the badges, the folders, the expressions. Fear, urgency, authority. A low murmur spread across the lobby like a rising tide. What's going on? Who are they with? Is this about the audits? But nobody asked me anything. They just watched. The elevator doors opened, and the 4 of us stepped inside. Harrington pressed the button for the executive floor. As the doors shut, I inhaled slowly. This was the floor where everything began to unravel and where everything would end. When we reached the top floor, the air was different. Quiet, polished, insulated from the rest of the company. The hallways looked expensive enough to hide anything. Maybe that was the point. The agents moved quickly, splitting into pairs. Harrington stayed with me. Whose office first? She asked. Marcus, I said. Start with the head of the snake. She nodded once. Inside Marcus's office, a junior legal assistant jumped to her feet. You can't be in here. Harrington flashed her badge. We can, and we are. The assistant went pale and backed away. Agent Davis began photographing the room. Another agent opened desk drawers, file cabinets, inspection logs. Claire, Harrington said. Which files would he hide? Not in the obvious places. I walked around the room scanning. Marcus always kept a secondary drive. He thought no one noticed him using it. Harrington asked, "Where?" "Right here." I crouched beside the radiator panel. A sleek decorative cover. He used to reach under it during meetings. Pressed lightly. Soft click sounded. The panel opened half an inch. The legal assistant gasped. Davis looked impressed. Inside the compartment sat a small silver drive. Exactly where I knew it would be. Harrington removed it with gloves. "This could be critical." "It will be," I said. The assistant whispered. "He told us this was a ventilation panel." Harrington didn't respond. She simply turned to me. "Next office." By 2 p.m. the building was no longer quiet. Word had spread faster than emails, faster than rumors, faster than fear itself. Executives were being escorted out of their offices, not in handcuffs, but flanked by federal agents, their faces rigid and colorless. The hallways filled with stunned employees watching their once powerful leaders shrink into shadows. Vivian, the operations VP, exited her office, trembling. "What is this?" she demanded. "You can't. This is absurd." Davis held up a document. "We can, and we have a warrant." She spotted me, then standing behind Harrington. "You," she hissed, pointing a manicured finger at me. "You did this." "No," I said calmly. "You did this." Her lips parted in disbelief. She looked like someone watching her entire identity crumble. 2 more executives emerged from their corner suites as the agents read their temporary suspension orders. Their eyes flicked between each other, searching for someone to blame. Anyone but themselves. I stood still, watching the realization settle across their faces like a slow, suffocating fog. 8 executives, Marcus included, were guided toward the elevator. Some silent, some stunned, some whispering frantic explanations that wouldn't save them. The doors closed with a metallic thud. By 2 p.m., the power structure of Vidian Industries had toppled, and I had only begun. When Harrington and I returned to the corridor, she spoke quietly. "Claire, what you exposed may reshape an entire segment of this industry." I exhaled slowly. It needed to be done. "Just know," she added, "things may get complicated from here. People don't lose power quietly." He nodded. "I'm prepared for whatever comes next." But the truth was, I wasn't prepared for who would confront me before the day ended. Because as we stepped into the hallway, someone was waiting, someone I didn't expect. And the look in his eyes told me this wasn't over. It was only the beginning. He was leaning against the glass wall outside Marcus' office when we stepped into the hallway, arms folded, expression unreadable. Daniel of all people. He was the last I expected to see there. He'd been my closest ally during my first months at Vidian. A senior project director with a reputation for integrity. Someone who'd warned me quietly, subtly, that certain executives played by a different set of rules. He never gave specifics, but he always made sure I looked in the right places. And then about a month ago he changed. Stopped dropping by my office. Stopped answering after-hours calls. Stopped making the sarcastic comments that used to break tense days. I thought he was distancing himself for his own safety. Now I wasn't so sure. As soon as his eyes locked onto mine, the hallway seemed to tighten around us. Harrington paused beside me, assessing him instantly. "Ms. Wilson," Daniel said, pushing off the wall. "We need to talk." Harrington stepped slightly in front of me. "And you are?" Daniel Hart, senior director, his jaw clenched, and someone who knows exactly how far this thing goes. Harrington studied him. "Are you claiming to be a cooperating insider?" His laugh was rough. "Claiming? No, I'm telling you." My pulse spiked. "Daniel, what are you talking about?" He turned to me, and the exhaustion in his face was unmistakable. Dark circles, a stiffness in the shoulders I'd never seen before. This wasn't arrogance or fear. It was someone carrying too much for too long. "I tried to warn you," he said quietly. But you kept digging faster than they expected. Warn me about what? Asked. He glanced at the nearby security cameras before lowering his voice. Tomas didn't leave quietly, and neither will they. The name hit me like a punch to the ribs. My predecessor, the man whose sudden disappearance started my suspicions. Daniel, I said. What do you know about Tomas? He exhaled shakily. More than I wanted to. Harrington stepped in. Mr. Hart, if you have information relevant to this investigation, this conversation needs to happen in a controlled environment. Daniel nodded once, but his eyes stayed on me. You're not safe here, he said. You think today is the end of it, but it's not. They'll try to shift everything onto you. They already drafted a secondary report last night, claiming you manipulated the data. My throat tightened. They what? I saw Marcus editing it himself. He planned to submit it to the board after your meeting today. Harrington pulled out her notebook. You're saying they fabricated evidence? Yes, Daniel said. They were preparing a narrative months in advance. They knew Tomas was going to blow the whistle, so they built a new origin story, one they could recycle with you. A cold wave washed down my spine. A replacement scapegoat. Why tell me now? Asked. The question hovered longer than it should have. Finally he said, voice low. Because you did what Thomas couldn't, and they're terrified. They won't go down quietly. Harrington nodded sharply. Mr. Hart, you're coming with us. Daniel didn't resist. He just sighed a long, defeated breath. Before they walked him away, he turned to me. Claire, don't trust anyone who isn't already in that room with you. He motioned toward the conference space where investigators were gathering evidence. You think you've seen everything. You haven't. And then he disappeared behind the door with Harrington and the others. When they left, I stood alone in the corridor for a moment, trying to steady myself. Fabricated reports, pre-planned scapegoating. A cover-up organized months before I ever stepped foot inside Vidian. The walkout hadn't been impulsive. It was rehearsed, practiced, a final attempt to discredit me before the truth came out. I walked toward the end of the hallway where the windows overlooked the city skyline. The glass vibrated faintly with the hum of helicopters. News crews circling above the building like vultures sensing a weakened animal. Inside, employees huddled in knots. The rumor mill churned like a live wire, every whisper louder than the last. 8 executives escorted out. Federal agents everywhere. Claire Wilson was with them. She must have found something serious. For the first time since the walkout, I felt something new rising in my chest. Not fear, not anger, not humiliation. Conviction. This wasn't just about me. This was about the patients harmed by faulty equipment, the small businesses bankrupted by corrupt supply practices, the workers threatened into silence, the man, Thomas, who'd been erased. And now Daniel, someone who'd watched the machine from the inside long enough to understand its darkest edges. I reached into my coat pocket and touched the small external drive. 8 executives down, evidence secured, and an insider ready to speak. But I knew Daniel was right. This wasn't over. Not even close. Because the ones who hadn't been escorted out today, the ones still hiding in shadows, were far more dangerous. And tomorrow morning at the emergency board session, they would reveal themselves. Willingly or not. By the next morning, Vidian's headquarters didn't look like a tech giant anymore. It looked like a crime scene holding itself together by a thread. Temporary barricades surrounded the property. News vans lined the sidewalks. Reporters clustered at the entrances, calling out questions I didn't answer. Inside, security had tripled. Employees walked quietly, avoiding eye contact, as if the building itself had become dangerous. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 8 a.m. At 7:55, Zoe, the board chair's assistant, met me outside the executive floor. "They're waiting for you," she said softly. Everyone's tense. Tense was an understatement. When she opened the boardroom door, the air felt thick enough to chew. 20 people sat around the long walnut table, Board members, attorneys, senior staff who hadn't yet been suspended. 3 chairs sat empty, the ones taken away yesterday. Edmund, the board chair, stood at the head of the table. "Miss Wilson," he said, "please come in." Dozens of eyes followed me as I walked to the front of the room. Some held anger, some fear. Some were simply empty, like they were already grieving the fall of something they had believed was unshakable. "Before we begin," Edmund continued, "I must inform the board that 8 executives have been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The Federal Compliance Division has been granted full access to Vidion's internal systems." A ripple of alarm. One board member leaned forward. "Are we in criminal territory?" "That depends," Edmund said, "on the evidence presented today." He gestured for me to begin. I connected my laptop to the screen behind me. The lights dimmed. The same presentation the executives walked out on yesterday glowed across the monitors. Except this time I included the missing slide, the one I'd saved. "Yesterday," I said, steadying my voice, "I presented structural failures in our supply chain protocols. What I didn't show was the root cause." Clicked forward. The screen displayed a timeline of altered audit results, manipulated subcontractor vetting files, and financial transfers tied to falsified safety records. A murmur spread across the room. "These patterns aren't accidents," I continued. "They're coordinated behaviors spanning at least 3 years." I turned to face them. And the executives who walked out yesterday were directly involved in all of it. One attorney raised a hand. "Miss Wilson, do you have proof of intent?" Clicked again. Screenshots of group messages, approval chains, metadata logs, a video clip from the day before. The audio played clearly. Marcus's voice echoed through the dark room. "Don't bother finishing. No one cares." A board member whispered, "My God." Pause the video. "This recording," I said, "was captured by the room's automated system according to Policy 4.3, which all of you approved." Silence thickened. Then someone spoke from the far end of the table. "Where is Tomas?" Edmund stiffened. "Tomas resigned for medical reasons." "That's what we were told." "No," I said quietly. "Tomas created encrypted backups of all this data. He planned to submit it, but was threatened with fabricated fraud charges if he didn't sign a settlement." A wave of shock shuddered through the room. "How do you know that?" a board member asked. "Because yesterday," I said, "Daniel Hart confirmed it." Edmund looked sharply at me. "Mr. Hart is cooperating." "He is," I replied. He saw the secondary narrative the executives prepared to frame me. The same strategy they used on Thomas. An attorney stood. "You're saying they planned to scapegoat you?" He nodded. "They walked out yesterday so they could claim I was unstable, incompetent, and acting alone." "Jesus," someone whispered. I switched to the final set of slides. "This morning," I said, "federal agents are executing search warrants at 9 additional locations. They have retrieved Marcus' hidden drive. They have access to every altered report, every payment trail, every deleted file." A board member pressed a hand to her forehead. "This will destroy us." "No," Edmund said quietly. "What they did will destroy us. What Ms. Wilson did might save what's left." He turned toward me. "What do you recommend, Claire?" The question stunned me for a moment, not because he asked, but because of what came next. "I resign," I said simply. A ripple of shock. "You what?" someone blurted. "I'm stepping down effective immediately." Edmund frowned. "You've been instrumental in uncovering this. You could help rebuild." I shook my head. "I didn't do this to rebuild Vidion. I did this because lives were being harmed, because silence was enabling corruption, and because Tomas didn't get the chance to finish what he started." Closed my laptop. "My work here is done." The room stayed silent as I gathered my things. When I reached the door, someone called out, "Claire." Turned. It was the board member who had first asked about Tomas. Her face was soft, almost weary. "Thank you," she said, "for telling the truth when no one else would." I nodded once and stepped into the hallway. Outside the building, the cool air hit my skin like a reset button. Reporters clamored nearby, but I kept walking, slipping through the crowd unnoticed. My phone buzzed. A new email from Dr. Harrington. Subject: Case progress. Body: charges moving forward. You did the right thing. Let's talk next steps. And below that, another email from Daniel Hart. Subject: whatever comes next, you didn't stand alone. I stood there breathing in the morning light, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. Not victory. Relief. 'Cause the message was clear. Power can corrupt. Silence can destroy. But truth spoken by even one person can move mountains.